3 a.m. Coney podcast. Let's get right into it. Like, subscribe, and share. Every podcaster does this. They ask you to like, subscribe, and share because if you do that, then I like doing it more. So please do that so that I can do it more and I can be excited about it. And look, I'm already regretting not having a water next to me. This is how it goes. You go live, you set it for 12, you freak out a little bit, and then you're like, where's my water? Where's my water? No, I just need to cough real quick. This is what you sign up for when you click on one of my videos. It is an absolute madhouse because I grew up in broadcasting or whatever this industry is, and I did radio. So you had to go live at 12, and I set the time for 12, and I said, oh, man, I got to go live right now. And so you're walking into a madhouse. Let's just get right into this because this is a Bengals training camp preview. And the question that's on everybody's mind and why national media heads are doubting the Cincinnati Bengals is because of this Super Bowl hangover idea. And it's an idea that is really set in some truth. And we've heard Joe Burrow talk about this truth before when he watched The Football Life of Kurt Warner and how that Rams team, when they lost to Tom Brady, took that extremely difficult and didn't bounce back from it, didn't allow themselves an opportunity to chase another one. And so what we saw this week was Joe Burrow throwing a football with Jordan Palmer, who just did an interview with Colin Cowherd praising his work ethic, calling him Brady-esque in his maniacal need to get better at the skill. And I've talked about this before, how athletes reach their best and peak performance when they decide to stop proving themselves to everybody else and just want to prove to themselves that they're going to be the best player they are. And so while Joe Burrow was the backup quarterback at Ohio State, he had to decide that his success was only inner because these coaches aren't going to believe in me. These coaches aren't going to give me the time to play. So I'm not proving them right. I have to prove myself. Can I be the best possible version of me? And when athletes decide that, it's a really powerful tool. And I think that the Cincinnati Bengals and Jordan Palmer and this relationship is really key for Joe Burrow because he's got so many resources that he's tuned into. And I saw him throwing with the Super Bowl ball. And we saw this going viral a little bit on Twitter. We tweeted about it at 3 a.m. Coney. Go ahead and follow at 3 a.m. Coney. It helps our Twitter feed. But he's holding the Super Bowl ball, which I found really interesting. And I know that this is crazy late summer, July sports talk where we sit around and we think about what type of ball is he holding? And it just might be a ball that Joe tossed in his bag, and he probably is not thinking twice about it. But that's kind of the point, isn't it? He isn't thinking twice about that he lost this game. He sits there and he holds the football and he goes, you know what, I can do this. It's fine. It's Super Bowl. We lost. Whatever. It was one game. They're not going to allow one game, one moment to derail what it would have been. Because if you think about that Super Bowl, if the Cincinnati Bengals win, one play goes one other direction. Although they were really outmatched by the Rams in that game. And watching it back, I really recommend because the way the game's set up, the way the announcers talked about it, the fact that the Bengals all of a sudden were in control of the game, it was complete shock. It was like a train wreck happening, and it was off script. And the fact that they put themselves in what was supposed to be the crowning achievement for the Rams and gave them something to overcome in that Super Bowl, it shows the quality of the team. And listen, I know that everybody said that in 1981 and 1988 after they lost those Super Bowls to the 49ers, when they gave Joe Montana and Bill Walsh their first ring, when they gave another ring in 1988 to Joe Montana and Bill Walsh's final ring, the fourth ring in 1988 for the San Francisco 49ers and Joe Montana and Bill Walsh. Actually, no, they won in 89. I think that was Bill Walsh's last year, and I think Joe Montana won more. I wasn't alive, so how can I comment? But you know what? This Cincinnati Bengals team, when we look at NFL history, they were set up to continue this success. And we talked about this numerous times on the 3 a.m. Coney. And this is where I think other AFC North fans really get this thing misplaced, and why I think that this Super Bowl run, if the Cincinnati Bengals can emotionally bounce back from it, which is the topic of the show, this Super Bowl run can be a complete jet fuel motivator for the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously. Or it can be your downfall. Those are the two options. Why are the Cincinnati Bengals specifically designed to bounce back from this type of loss? Because they've been through the depths of absolute hell to get there, right? And when we talked about that leading up to the AFC Championship game, we talked about the 1981 San Francisco 49ers. They were called the No-Name Niners. They had this miracle run, barely had any significant players at the time, and all of these players obviously ended up in the Hall of Fame. But that team was out of nowhere, and they went through the depths through the last 2 to 3 years, acquiring the number 1 pick, only winning a couple games. Same thing with the Cowboys in the 90s, and we've talked numerous times on this show about the comparisons between the 2021 Bengals and the 1991 Dallas Cowboys. And the reason that those teams had success, and The Athletic wrote about it as well, is that when you go through the doldrums for 2 to 3 to 4 years, a few things happen. Number one, you acquire a lot of talent because you're at the top of the draft. And that's what the Bengals did with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Logan Wilson. And think of all the significant players that they've acquired in the last couple of drafts because they were so bad. They fell to the depths. Combine that with the fact that if you stick with the coach through the depths and then he leads them to success, it only cements the culture even more because you got there together and you really believe in what you accomplished and how you accomplished it. So you have the culture set. Now, the 1981 San Francisco 49ers, the 2001 Patriots, the 1992 Dallas Cowboys, they all won the Super Bowl. Now, the 91 Cowboys lost to the Lions 31-6 in the divisional round before bouncing back in 92. But these teams that went through the doldrums and then bounced back always stayed on the scene for 4 to 5 years because the culture they had built to get there had to be sustainable. The only exception on the list that The Athletic released, and I wish I had the article in front of me, was the 2017 Jaguars that had this incredible defense that got completely ripped apart by a shady, weird-acting owner and players that wanted too much money on the defense, and the fact Blake Bortles was their quarterback. Everybody else on the list had sustained success, right? The Seattle Seahawks are a team that's on that list where they go through the doldrums of being a bad team and then they reach the heights of an AFC Championship game or an NFC Championship game or a Super Bowl. They stay there. The Pittsburgh Steelers from the 70s, their dynasty started that way. Now, there's not a single one of those dynasties that reached the Super Bowl and lost and then continued. Actually, if they reached the Super Bowl, they won it every single time. These dynasties, the 70s Cowboys, the 90s, the 70s Steelers, the 90s Cowboys, the 80s Niners, they went through the doldrums, then they reached the top, and then they won the Super Bowl. And the same thing with the New England Patriots, although they went through a Super Bowl into the 90s, so it wasn't exactly the same in New England. But these dynasties often start the same, and the Bengals are the only team that got there and lost in the Super Bowl. So this is why you have the national media when you think that they would be the hot team rising. And I guarantee you, had they lost in Tennessee, Randy Bullock walks out there, kicks a 55-yard field goal, everybody's talking about the Bengals are going 13-4. We were talking about the Bengals going 13-4 on this show specifically already before they even made the Super Bowl. So if Randy Bullock walks out there and makes a kick and all of a sudden the Tennessee Titans are victorious in that game, and then the Bengals sign 3 major free agents on the offensive line, they make the exact same moves on defense, you're coming up with the expectation that this team is going to rise and they're going to win the Super Bowl and they're going to have 13, 14 wins. But now they make the big game, they lose barely, and this idea of a Super Bowl hangover, because it's happened so many times in NFL history, it poisons you. And Joe Burrow is deciding by holding a Super Bowl ball, by saying that by going out immediately after the game, by not basking in the glory of just making the Super Bowl, being like, hey, it sucked, we're not going to go out and celebrate and do a bunch of commercials and be out front and center. And he's going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Jamar on the cover of GQ, but they're not doing massive media campaigns. They weren't very public in the summer. They took their pill, they took their loss, and they moved forward with it. And they've handled it super professionally. They've shown that ability to bounce back, and Joe Burrow has shown that ability to bounce back as well. by just literally last year with the knee injury. And that's literally his entire story. 3-star recruit. Athens High School, never won a playoff game. Oh, win 8 of them, right? LSU, can't ever beat Alabama. Oh, I'll beat Alabama. Bounce back, bounce back. Big hit in the Fiesta Bowl. Bounce back. That's his story. So it's kind of fitting, and this is where I get narrative-based instead of football-based. We're going to get to the football in the second and talk about the 5 players to watch in Bengals training camp. But the narrative of the season is that the bounce-back kid, as Caleb Moore, hey Caleb. But the narrative of the season is that the bounce-back kid, Joe Burrow, can bounce back from the Super Bowl loss. And it's fitting, I think, that it'd be the first dynasty to start after a loss in the Super Bowl. And that's me being wishful thinking. But I think that there's reasons to think the team can be of that level. Can they win a Super Bowl? I don't know. Playoffs are a crapshoot. But I think that there's plenty of reasons that the team can be at that level. And we'll explore that throughout the summer and in training camp and with Matt Roden. And I know I went all over the place, but the Bengals' emotions in this situation and Joe Burrow having the ability to overcome that emotion by holding a football that has the Super Bowl on it and not making a big deal of it and saying, hey, you know, whatever, we lost a game, we're moving forward. We were building this anyway. This was coming anyway. And I think that's really powerful and important. But let's talk about the players to watch in training camp. I've got an article releasing on Stripe Pipe. I'm a contributor there now, posting articles every now and then whenever I can, in between all the other stuff I'm doing with the Coney and the podcast. And coaching a bunch outside, a lot of bike rides everywhere. So, ton of fun. And I hope you're enjoying your summer as well. And this is the dead period where we're not talking about a lot. And we're talking about players like Jackson Carman. So if you're interested in left guard talk, I'm here for you and you can please stay. So Jackson Carman, it's now or never, man. The thing about Jackson Carman, guys, I didn't like him already in terms of his just attitude right after the draft. And I didn't want to say things like that because it's really immature to make a judgment through the TV when I'm miles away and I'm just watching his reaction after. But it just felt like that Jackson was like, oh, yep, hometown team, Cincinnati. I'm going to walk in here. They're going to start me at left guard. Of course, I played at Clemson. And he just had this like big deal about him. And when you read his draft profile in The Beast with Dane Brugler, which I read every year, every Bengals draft pick, I make sure I go and read that entire thing. And he does personality, in-depth profiles. It immediately said, hey, he's a little casual, you know, the maturity questions. And immediately you're like, I don't really know if I trust this guy. And then you have the story come out about, we don't need to dive into it. Just Google Jackson Carman. You can find all the details yourself. But it makes you question the guy immediately at every turn. Then he comes into training camp, his first training camp, overweight, questions from the coaching staff. And this offseason and this training camp is so crucial for Jackson Carman in his career. If this guy cannot win the left guard job and he loses it to, God forbid, in his case, Cordell Volson, the 5th-round pick from North Dakota State, a guy who is winning national championships, not like Jackson Carman was in the FBS, but in the FCS. God forbid Cordell Volson beats him out for the job. Jackson Carman's going to end up without a job, and no team's really going to sign him with this kind of story attached and a background as the last remaining piece from a Bengals offensive line that was a super failure. And this is now or never. He has to perform. He has to win the starting job if he wants to be a contributor at the professional football level. He has to be the left guard. He has the advantage in every scenario. He knows the scheme. He's supposed to have the athletic advantages if he's in shape. So it's now or never for Jackson Carman. And if he doesn't come now, then I don't know if his professional career is going to take off. Let's talk about Eli Apple now, another player to watch in training camp. Can he beat out the rookie Cam Taylor-Britt? That's the big question mark. I don't think he is going to hold on to the job all year. I think he'll win it through camp, and I think Eli's going to show up really ready to go. He's on a 1-year contract. Cam Taylor-Britt knows he's a rookie, knows he has time, so there might not be as much urgency from Cam Taylor-Britt. And I really hope that these rookies don't feel intimidated that they're coming on a Super Bowl roster, because rookies in the past for Cincinnati, they're coming in, I'm going to change the culture. They have a little more confidence about them. And that's a super key for the Bengals veterans, is to make sure that these rookies coming in feel like they have the right to compete for these jobs. And I think that Zac Taylor and the coaching staff are going to try to establish that same thing. And this is one of those key battles. If Cam Taylor-Britt outperforms Eli Apple in training camp and he deserves more snaps from the get-go, then that immediately should be the move from the Bengals coaching staff, because that's how you preserve that we've got to practice hard culture, which the Bengals have really been selling, and I think was a key part of them making the Super Bowl. So that's a key battle to watch and a key player to watch when you're reading the training camp reports. Eli Apple, can he beat out rookie Cam Taylor-Britt for the outside corner role? You've got Tyson Anderson and Dax Hill rumoredly could maybe play outside corner. I don't really see that happening. Another player to watch, Mike Thomas. Now this is great. So normally a fan base is going to be talking about their quarterback. Normally a fan base is going to be talking about, oh my gosh, our starting wide receiver, how's he going to do? Oh, we have a new running back, how's he going to play? No, in Cincinnati, we're talking about our fourth wide receiver because the roster is so set. Mike Thomas. Will he be the fourth wide receiver? Can he catch the ball in camp? He can't really drop much. He has a thin margin of error where the organization might go to the outside and acquire talent, where the organization might elevate somebody beneath Mike Thomas into his role. If he wants to be that security blanket, that first guy up, if God forbid one of the three Migos happens, if something happens to him, a twisted ankle, something, anything, a pulled hammy, anything that takes him out for 2 to 3 games, is Mike Thomas going to be able to fill a role and catch the football? That's a huge question for training camp. And listen, if he has a great camp, he has already got that communication with Joe Burrow. There's a rumor that they have a good relationship since the beginning, since his rookie year. So if he can just catch the football, he can secure that fourth wide receiver spot. It's super important for Mike Thomas to perform well in this training camp. If he doesn't, there's going to be somebody else, whether an outside free agent or somebody beneath him, that's sliding up to take that role, to take that reps. And it's an important role, because if you become the third wide receiver under Joe Burrow, that's an 800-900 yard role. You can really make money in this league if you're one of the top 3 wide receivers of an elite quarterback. Chris Evans is the next guy to watch out for. Now, Chris Evans is going to have a lot of focus from the national media. Why is that? He's a fantasy football handicap. Backup running backs in fantasy football have tremendous value for those of you that don't play. And Chris Evans, to me, and to a lot of already fantasy observers, might have the most value in terms of late round sleepers, handcuffs, handicaps, however you want. I think it's called a handcuff. Yeah, it's a handcuff. Listen, I just play in one fantasy league. I'm not all into it. I just try to use a little bit of the knowledge from just watching all the time to maybe win my fantasy league, but it is a handcuff. Chris Evans is the backup running back. Hey, if Joe Mixon goes down, this guy can get a lot of reps, and he's more exciting than a Samaje Perine, who Zac Taylor likes, but I don't know, it has actual fantasy upside in production. So there are going to be articles all the time about Chris Evans in training camp. Oh, how many first-team reps is Chris Evans getting? Oh, he's really come together with his pass blocking. So that means the Bengals are going to trust to have him out there on third down more often in case they need to keep him in on a blitz. So if those things happen for Chris Evans, if he can pass block, if he can engage in the role of being the second-string running back behind Joe Mixon, of being the third down guy who has explosive receiving ability, who has all that talent he showed at Michigan without barely being used, then he is going to explode on the fantasy football scene if Joe Mixon goes down for a week or two, and he's going to have large production. He's going to have a tremendous value at the back end of fantasy football rosters. And the back end is how you win your fantasy football league. All right, final camp position battle that I'm looking at, Kevin Huber. Now, the story about Kevin Huber, guys, is that he's a really good holder. Now, he's the punter, but he's also the holder. And I understand this from the special teams coach, and I really understand it from a field goal operation perspective. And God bless Pat McAfee for making this popularized with football fans, the importance of the holder and the kicker and all those things that go into this very important high. I mean, Evan McPherson was the leading scorer of the Cincinnati Bengals in the playoffs. I've had people throw that at me all the time. Oh, he scored more points than Joe Burrow did. Cool. So did Adam Vinatieri versus Tom Brady. But anyway, the story of that is that kickers in the kicking operation is tremendously important for that in the sport of football. You got to kick to win games. Ask Nick Saban. How's Nick Saban not won the SEC? Because he can't kick field goals. So there's tons of examples of that operation failing when the holder is changed. And so the Bengals are really nervous because Kevin Huber has mastered the art of holding at his advanced age, and he's one game shy of breaking the franchise record for games played. So if he wins the job this season, he will be the longest tenured Cincinnati Bengal ever as the punter, and that's actually a significant achievement to have the most games played in one of the 32 NFL franchises history. I mean, that's something that you can tell the grandkids about for sure if you're Kevin Huber. So the thing about Kevin is that his punting deteriorated down the stretch of the season. So if holding is that much more important to the Bengals that they're going to sacrifice 5 to 10 yards that I'm sure Drew Chrisman could provide as being the better leg. I mean, Drew Chrisman does have a better leg at this moment than Kevin Huber. Maybe he doesn't have the touch and accuracy. I'm not watching these guys punt every day, but I'm sure Drew can get better at that. And I guarantee that the Bengals will have a better punting game, whether that's just 5 or 7 or 8 yards with Drew Chrisman than Kevin Huber. But if Kevin Huber just makes the field goal operation tick, then you have to go that way, I guess. So that's going to be something that's interesting to watch. I think Kevin Huber, the only way that he loses this job if he starts shanking punts, because I think the Bengals kind of want to be conservative with that trio. I feel like they think they can hold on to Chrisman for a while, and maybe they can dive back into the punting market next year. I don't feel like they feel rushed there. As long as Kevin's just kicking the ball straight and doing okay, I think that Kevin Huber will end up holding on to that job. All right, the final part of the show, and I think that we covered this a lot last year, but I think it's the most important thing to understand about the 2021 season and about the Cincinnati Bengals was that Thursday night football game. Now, this was a game that I attended, right? And so what do I mean talking about those Cincinnati Bengals? What are you talking about? So there's a bunch of things in the news right now. You've got the naming rights change for the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll talk about that on the show this week. We're going to dive completely in throughout the later months of July and early August into every angle of this on the show. Why? Because if I don't talk about it here, I'm going to talk about it to my wife, and then she's going to be like, can you really wait till September to throw all this Bengals stuff at me? So you're going to get it instead of her. But you've got the naming rights deal. You've got the white Bengal helmets. You've had the social media change that really started with a New Day campaign back when they hired Zac Taylor in 2019. You have a modernization of the stadium. You have a Ring of Honor. You have the ruler of the jungle. You have a complete revamp of what it feels like to go to Bengals games, to be a Bengals fan. And you've seen that in surveys and trust rankings released by The Athletic, in social media engagement, with the Bengals having arguably one of the most engaged fan bases on Twitter. That's why I can have this tiny little podcast and it still does all right, because we've got such a large following online. Thank you guys, right? All of that combined versus the old habits and the old luck of the Cincinnati Bengals throughout the 2019, 2020, and very early parts of the 2021 season. And it came with the knee injury, and it came with Trey Waynes not working out, and it came with the Carlos Dunlap situation and the rumors about Lou Anarumo cussing at players all the time and players not liking that. And it came with all these weird controversies and Bengals-like things, and losing that game to the Browns on Thursday night, and losing that game to the Browns in the comeback. And all these things that felt like the disaster of 2017, 18, 19, and 20 were combining with all the new things about them trying to be more modern and be better to fans. And they're signing free agents and DJ Reader and Trey Hendrickson and, all these great players. And so leading into 2021, it was all combined. You had the positivity of, hey, they really are changing as an organization. They really are evolving. They really are growing with, but all this old stuff is happening too. This old, oh my God, it's the Bengals at the same time. And for me, the Thursday night football game, because of its start in the season, because of its context, because of the characters involved, was the most important moment of the 2021 season, because oftentimes early momentum affects late momentum, early moments, early ideas will create change throughout the rest of players' careers. And so let's set this moment up. The Cincinnati Bengals were 2-1. Exciting 2-1. They had the overtime win against the Vikings where Joe Burrow looked like he could barely move, but he had a 100-plus passer rating. It was absolutely exhilarating. They kick a game-winning field goal, even though maybe Dalvin Cook didn't fumble. Maybe they should have lost that game, but whatever. They're 1-0. Now it's week 2 in Chicago. Oh, the offense only scores 3 points in 3 quarters, but they almost make a comeback, so okay. The offensive line sucks. We see that again. They're not fixed. And you've got this trepidation, and then you beat the Steelers. But, oh, my God, they look inept at quarterback. The Steelers aren't the same thing. Yeah, I know we went into Heinz Field, but did we really even have to do anything? It was impressive, but is this really the Steelers? So you have, and I think TJ Watt was out for that game as well. So you have all that combining. Now they're 2-1. Okay, now you're playing Urban Meyer, who now we know did not know who Aaron Donald was coaching the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were 0-3. They looked like they were on the road to what they ended up having, which was the number 1 pick in the draft. And it's a Thursday night, the only primetime game of the season for the Cincinnati Bengals on a Thursday night against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, the rematch from the national championship game for Joe Burrow. And this was the feature for the Bengals for the season, we thought at the time. It was the debut of the Bengals Ring of Honor, something that Mike Brown and ownership had refused to do for decades, even though players begged to have it, and now they're finally doing it, and we're getting great guys inducted into this Ring of Honor. But that was the first night they did it. And the game started with Joe Burrow on fire and the Cincinnati Bengals down 14-0. And anybody that was there at the stadium understood the vibe and the feeling that happened there, because this was supposed to be different. This is supposed to be a team that wins in prime time. This was supposed to be a guy that's not Andy Dalton or any of those guys that folds under pressure or these teams that fold under pressure. It's supposed to be a new day. And they're down 14-0 at halftime. And the entire stadium is looking around and they're going, "Oh my God, it's the Bengals. We're still the Bengals." They've been saying that we're something different, and we're not. We're still the Cincinnati Bengals. And everybody looks around, and the Ring of Honor ceremony is just kind of like, cool. You've done this 20 years late, and we're still the same old team. We're losing to an 0-3 Jaguars team on a Thursday night. I was there. That was the vibe. Fans were fighting in my section to start the third quarter. Bengals fans fighting Bengals fans. People punching mothers. Beers flying everywhere. Nobody watching the game. The absolute worst of being a Bengals fan, which is the people throwing beer on each other and the bad behavior at the stadiums. Bengals are notorious for 911 calls around the stadium. Go check that article out. Type in Bengals 911 calls Paul Brown. They're the leader in all of North American sports. So you have all these negatives occurring at the same time. And then Joe Burrow sits there on the field, and we see on the mic'd up after the game, he says, "Put it in my hands." He says, "I'm taking over." Like, he talks more than he ever talks on the field. Joe Burrow's a reserved guy, and he takes over the game. And this idea of, oh, can Joe Burrow change the Bengals? And in one half and one comeback, credit to the defense as well. The Jaguars only scored 7 points. But the Bengals scored every time they had the football, milked the clock to kick a game-winning field goal, and Joe Burrow played perfect football on a big, giant stage and proved to not just the national media and all the Bengals fans in the stadiums, but every player on that team, yo, I'm the guy. Like, I came here, I told you I'm the guy. I said, put it in my hands. We're going to win the game. And I don't care if we came out as the old Bengals in the first half. We're the new Bengals now. And there's only very rare people in the history of sports that can accomplish that as an individual. And if you were there that night, and if you go back and watch that game, that is exactly what Joe Burrow did through tremendously tough circumstances and tremendous things to overcome. That was the game. And so if you want to rewatch any game from the 2021 season to understand what the Bengals were as an organization, as a team, as a culture, to what they became throughout the course of one half, you got to watch that game. And I'm telling you, I made a drive that night from Cincinnati all the way back to Chicago, and I knew in that vehicle that this was different, that it had changed. I was going to predict for the next year. I was looking at the schedule for 2022 after that game. I'm like, yeah, well, next year they'll probably go like 13-4, 14-3. This year they'll go like 10-7, 9-8, as I'd predicted before. And then this guy went out, and then we made the Super Bowl. And then they made it to the biggest game of the year. And then they accomplished everything that they accomplished. So Ravens fans and Browns fans, they get it twisted. Oh, Bengals fans, you guys are on your high horse. You guys are on your high horse because you made the Super Bowl. You made this fluke run where you needed Ryan Tannehill to pee down his leg, and you needed Derek Carr to not make the throw on fourth down or an inadvertent whistle, or you needed Patrick Mahomes to look like a completely different player twice down the stretch to make the Super Bowl. Before any of that happened, we were sitting here on this podcast, and a ton of Bengals fans were sitting here saying that the Bengals were different, that they had changed because of this player, this coach, and this entire organization embracing the change that he was bringing. That already happened. We were already claiming it had happened. And then they went out and almost won the damn Super Bowl. So this idea that I'm supposed to be calm, that I'm supposed to think this team isn't going to be great is insane. You're off your rocker. Because if I was already saying 13-4 before they even won a damn playoff game for 2022, and then they go out and they make the Super Bowl, they beat the Chiefs twice down the stretch, what do you want us to say? What do you want us to think? What do you want us to do? And that's the idea that the Bengals need to have in the season about themselves, that they are the team. And I think they had that idea, and the only worry about that idea is they get big-headed. Well, guess what? The entire media hates the Bengals, and I love it. It's my favorite thing. Not the entire media. Everybody is nicer to the Bengals than they were before, but they're still slotting them down. They're like 6th. They're like 7th. Oh, you're a good team now. Welcome, Bengals. You know, you're not this dominant team. You're not going to make this ascension. You're not the most athletic unit we've ever seen at any level. Instead, they're like, plus 2,100 to win the Super Bowl. Lowest odds since Kurt Warner, who was old, and the Cardinals, by the skin of their teeth, made the Super Bowl, which you could say about the Bengals, but the Cardinals were not this ascending young team. Worst odds to make it back to the Super Bowl that lost the game since the Cardinals, which is insane. Even the Rams with Jared Goff had higher odds than a 25-year-old quarterback paired with a 22 and a 23-year-old wide receiver, who are arguably all three top 10 at their position, if not top 5 at their position for Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. All these things colliding is way different than the Arizona Cardinals. So now you take this team that my only fear, and your only fear as fans, was, man, what if their head gets too big? What if they think too highly of themselves now, and they haven't achieved anything yet? They didn't achieve the ultimate goal. Well, guess what? They're the most disrespected team in their eyes in the NFL. Just look at the way they're tweeting about Madden ratings. Just look at the way that they're engaging with some of these takes online, with the way they engage with some of the narratives that have been tossed out there about the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is the perpetual advantage of playing in the Cincinnati market if you have Joe Burrow's mindset, which is doubt feeds the beast, baby. Doubt feeds the beast. All I need is for you to doubt me a little bit, and I can grab onto that, and I can do what Michael Jordan said at The Last Dance. I can take it personally, and I can move forward with it, and I can become a better player and more focused on my inner goals because you say that I can't do it. And they embraced that fully, and they got that last year in droves by only playing in one primetime game, by never being flexed in, and now this year was supposed to be the year that their head got too big. And yet, they're underdogs. They get to be the team all camp that everybody's sitting there and going, I don't think the Bengals are real. I think they're ready to regress. I don't know. Might be the fifth best team in the AFC, probably the second best team in their division. I mean, the Ravens were hurt last year. They got lucky. And that's what all they're going to hear. And that's all this team needed was a touch of doubt, a touch of somebody out there saying, they're probably not going to make it back. Who makes it back after losing a Super Bowl? And because you have Joe Burrow as the leader on the team, he's going to hold that Super Bowl ball and play with it and practice with it as a message to the team, as a message to himself, as a message to the culture of the Bengals that, yeah, we lost a game, but that's really not going to bother us. And if you're going to sit here and doubt us and tell us that the accomplishment we did have, which was because, listen, and I say this every time, and this is maybe some therapy that I've done for myself after losing a game like the Super Bowl, the end of the season sucks every time. Whether it's in week 17 when you're beating the Bengals backups, Cleveland, or it's in a divisional round, awful, gut-wrenching loss at home, Tennessee, or whether it's to your division rival at the end of a 27-year playoff drought at the time in 2015, like the Cincinnati Bengals had to the Steelers, that was absolutely gut-wrenching. Wherever your season ends, if it doesn't end with your players holding the Lombardi Trophy, which the greatest organizations in the sport have only done 6 times in the 50-plus year history of the Super Bowl, if it doesn't end there, it sucks. And I would rather it end at the last game than any other game prior, because it sucks just the same. And that's the mentality that the Bengals will have. Now, Zac Taylor says, hey, it haunts us. We have to engage with it. It's a game that we lost. We were close to a championship, but we have to understand that it would have sucked had we lost to the Chiefs just the same. It would have sucked if we lost to the Titans, and we would have made a different decision. Why would we ever make a different decision about ourselves, about our mentality, about our culture based on which game we lost? Because it's the same growth that we would have had to do. And so you take it as an accomplishment. We were in the Super Bowl. I have the Super Bowl cups in the cabinet, right? Joe Burrow's got the Super Bowl balls in his bag. Hey, we were AFC champions. We were in the Super Bowl. We're proud of that, and we're ready to move on and see if we can do it again. And we're ready to rebuild what we built. And I think that they're ready to have that type of maturity because they have the leader to provide that maturity. And everybody, I had a guy argue me on Twitter, oh, you do narrative-based sports talk and football. Well, listen, guy, every sports story I hear told by athletes is a narrative-based one, whether it's about leadership or who's in the locker room or how the culture worked or how it engaged, why teams weren't as good as other teams. It's not just talent, because these guys are all similar in talent. It is all those things that go into making a team, right? A team, a group of guys that's together. And Joe Burrow has demonstrated at every level of football, in every circumstance, as a guy that played defense first as varsity, a skinny little sophomore, wasn't supposed to be the quarterback, takes over, immediately is one of the best quarterbacks in the state. Whether it's at LSU, filling the role as the starter there and doing what he did time and time again, it's just, hey, fill a role, make a culture, make a team, make everybody better around me, because the team is fun to play on. And it's fun to play on because it's ultra competitive, yet it's not get in your face and scream. And those type of things combining into one thing in a culture is something that I knew would be successful in the NFL. And the fact that it's been more successful than I even thought, which if you heard me in 2018 and 2019, you'd have thought I was off my rocker about this. We're all stuck with saying, what else am I supposed to say? What else am I supposed to do except predict that this team is going to be the best in the NFL? So we did a lot of training camp preview. I did a lot of ranting that I needed to get out, but I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please remember to just subscribe to the show. I mean, you don't even have to watch future videos, but if you just subscribe and then we get up to 200, I can say, hey, now we're at 200 subscribers on YouTube, which is actually a pretty cool number. When you think about it, that's a lot of people. I imagine, like in Greek society, they would go out into the square and they would speak to 15 to 20 people, and they would say, oh, I'm speaking to the crowds of Greece. I can't do accents, but 15 to 20 people they'd be talking to. They'd be proud of it. And we've got 200 to 300 people watching our videos. We've got about 200 people getting ready to subscribe. We've got over 1,000 people following our Twitter account. So that's really awesome. And we'd like to just keep building that because it keeps giving me an excuse to come on here and rant about my favorite non-life thing, so entertainment thing, like whether Bengals, Star Wars, or anything. My favorite thing in the world is my wife, and then my second favorite thing is probably our 2 cats, and then another cat I would probably put below the PlayStation 5. No, I'm just kidding. It would be the cats above, right? It's the living things in our life. But in terms of sports entertainment, the Cincinnati Bengals are at the top of the list, and this show is a great outlet for me to rant through that. And so we really appreciate when you like, subscribe, and share to my ranting and my raving, because none of this would have ever fit into a 10-minute radio segment. I am good at outs and ins. I am good at those type of things, but how often do I actually do them on this show? Not at all. Why? Because it's our show and we don't have any commercials. I don't gotta toss anything. I don't have a clock in front of me. I can just keep talking until you click away. And I love all of you out there for watching the show, and I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, share. I'm just ranting. This is called the Midwestern exit, where I say goodbye. And I'll see you in about 15 and 20 minutes because I'm still going to be talking now. All right, we'll see you guys next time. Bengals going 13-4. We will have a discussion about the Baltimore Ravens on the next show and the fact that they already look like they're going to be injured again. So make sure you tune in to the next 3 a.m. Coney, where we'll discuss the Bengals' #1 division rival in the Baltimore Ravens. And we'll see you guys next time.